Hello, 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 and welcome to another Least Offend podcast. In this particular podcast, I will be discussing my entire tenant screening process, how we get tenants in the door, how we process them through, and through that process of processing them through, we screen them at each step, some ways directly, some ways indirectly, and how that's helped us and how we've come across, how we put together that process over time. Again, my name is Art Veal, and I'm your host. So let's get started on this right away. So the way that I've screened tenants in the past was very traditional. I would, run ads. People would call in. I would answer the call. I would tell them about the house, explain the process, and everything, and then they would say yes or no. I would set up to meet with them to go see the house and or the property, and then they would come see it. And if they liked it, they would fill out an application, and we would go from there. I'd run their background check, which was usually a criminal and credit check. And then if everything came back clean, then we signed paperwork and they'd rent the property. Very traditional. And for years, I did it this way, thinking that this was the best way. But a couple of years ago, I started to take a step back from my business, and I started to look at what did I not like about my business and what did I think I could improve. And some of the things I didn't like were I had a turnover rate that was higher than I liked. I didn't like the number of people that I had to either evict or that just left the property suddenly. And I wanted to see about reducing that. I didn't like the condition that tenants typically left my apartments or houses. And so I wanted to see how to reduce that. And I didn't like some of the aspects of the screening process because when I would meet tenants to show them or meet applicants to show them the house, they wouldn't show up. They'd call and say they were stuck in traffic. They would call and say they were running late, or they just wouldn't show up at all. And they said they found another place. And it was after I drove over there and went through this whole thing. So I came after looking at every part of the business or every part of this process I didn't like. I realized that the biggest setback and holdup in my screening process or in my process of filling an apartment was how I screened the tenants. So I went back to the drawing board. If you've ever seen the movie The Founder, I did a similar move to The Founder, and I reworked the entire way that I screened a tenant. And I looked at what I wanted to accomplish with the screening and how the best ways to make it easy on me, but still help the most people to see the property. And so this is the process that I've come up with, and it's worked exceptionally well. Before I tell you the process, let me tell you the end result. So the end result is I've been doing this way of screening tenants for the last 3 years. It's 2017 now, so it's been about 3 years. In that 3 years' time, I've had zero turnover. I have not had one tenant leave the property unless it was, mutually agreeable. But I haven't had any evictions. I've only had one slow-paying tenant. And on average, for every rental that I have, I probably reject about 4 people before I accept one person in the rental. Now, with my particular business, I do rent to own, so my screening is a little bit more difficult than a regular rental because I require a larger amount of money up front compared to a typical rental. But I'll go through the process because the overall process is the same. So the first thing that I changed is how I market my properties. I use a couple of online services. I do not, when I started years ago, I used to run newspaper ads. I no longer do that, and I'm sure nobody else does. I run ads on some of the online services, Zillow, Property Manager, Craigslist, those types of services. And Zillow allows me to run to Trulia. There's another service called Hot Pads. So I run through those services, but I handle everything pretty much through Craigslist and Zillow Property Manager. The first thing I do to help my property sell is I take a ton of pictures. The average property that I have, whenever I'm putting it out for the leasing, I take about 14 to 20 pictures for every property. I take pictures of every bedroom, the entryway, the front, the back, the garage, the kitchen, the bathroom, the family room, whatever is in the property. I try to get as many pictures as I can because I want the applicant to be the least surprised when they see the property. I want it to be every place that they saw in the pictures. I want it to be, that they saw it in the ad. And I don't do it with an iPhone or anything like that, or a cellular phone. I use a high quality DSLR camera to take pictures because they give me a good picture that I can balance the light, and it just puts the property in a good light. So that's the first thing. And then I put those pictures up on the ad and run the ad. Now, I do not have tenants. I used to have people, when a person saw the property, they would call in and leave me a message or call in and talk to me directly. And it got to a point where I put a system in place to stop that. Now, every ad that I run refers the person back to our website, which on our website has an online application. So to get into a property, the way I explain it to tenants, and the website kind of walks them through the whole process and why we have them do an application first. So again, when I send anybody from a ad, all the ads refer you to our website, and from the website they can fill out an application. And they fill it out before they see the property. I've given them enough pictures. I've explained in detail on the ad the terms and how they have to, what's involved. And so I request that they fill out an application first. And the reason I do that, this is my first screening piece. Well, it's the second. The first is that they see the house and they're not surprised. And so people that aren't interested or don't like the layout from the pictures, they already know, so they kind of self-screen themselves out. The next part is the application. If they can't follow directions, if they don't read the entire ad, because I always put the application link, the link to the application on the bottom of the ad. If they haven't read the entire ad, then they won't know how to get to the application. So that's part of them following through and being detail oriented. So it's another way to screen them. Once they go to fill out the application, it's an application on my website. It asks them questions about their income. It asks about where they're employed at. It basically asks all the questions. If you look at the previous podcast on questions to ask for screening a tenant, it asks all of those questions and then some. I'll put a link to the application to the website for my application. I'll put a link in the notes for this podcast if you want to take a look at it. And from there, they can ask for their name. It asks how many adults are moving in with them, how much does that person make in actual take-home pay every month, how often are they paid. It'll ask, where are they employed at, what expenses do they have, besides their regular bills. So do they pay a car note? Do they have credit cards? Are they current on their credit cards and car note? And you'd be surprised because people are very honest, at least from what I've seen over the last 3 years. People are very honest in their applications. And then in the bottom, one of the biggest screening tools I have is a section for explanation. So if you want to explain your situation or you want to tell me something that may not have been addressed in the application, they can fill that out. And you'd be amazed at some of the stories that people tell me. They'll tell me about they've been in an abusive marriage and they need to get out. They'll tell me about, their kids need to be in a better school system because there was, gunfire in the area. They'll tell me about a foreclosure that they had and they're kind of trying to recover from a foreclosure. So they'll give you a lot of detail. And the reason I like that is because before we've even talked, before they've even had a discussion with me, I can get a real sense of where this person is coming from. Some people will tell you, I don't have much money, I don't make a lot, but I really like, I really want to get into a place and I really want to, move forward with this. Can you tell me if I'm ready or not? Now, mine, so they submit that application. Now, mine goes a step further because I actually set up, I do computer software as well as real estate. And so my application actually screens through the computer and can score that person on the likelihood they are to be successful in my property. So it looks at how much they have to put down on the house. It looks at how much they bring in a month versus how much the rent is on the property, or my general range of rents. It'll look at if they've had any evictions. It'll look at all these different factors my application will actually look at, and it'll give me a score when it sends me the application. So I might the score is on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being someone I would never rent to, 10 being someone that I would highly like to rent to. And so typically my applicants score somewhere in the 6 to 8 range. I've had a couple of 9s and 10s. I've had some 1 through 5s. Typically anything above a 5 I'll consider. And from there, so that's part of the screening process also. So it's almost a check system where before I get into my feelings, because that's the biggest problem with screening tenants. We get to hear their story when we're talking to them on the phone. We kind of like what they're talking about, or we understand, or sometimes we're sympathetic. And these things are all great because empathy is a great thing, but this is a business and I need to make a business decision, and it does not need to be clouded in circumstance or your situation. So I always look at that, and then once they filled out an application and it's someone that I would consider, then I'll call them. I'll explain the process. Now, I don't set up to meet with tenants to see the property. I actually have lockbox codes on all of my houses, and I change the lockbox code probably every 2 or 3 days on the houses. So I go over there, check on the house, and I'll change the lockbox code. And so I'll tell them that I can get them in to see the house on the day that they want, and I'm going to give them a lockbox code. Now, I already have all their information, so I'm not worried about them breaking into the house because they don't know what I have, and I know their information because they didn't know they were going to use a lockbox code. And I'll give them, they'll say what day they want to come. If they want to come, today or tomorrow, then I'll give them the code that's good for today or tomorrow. If they want to come, let's say today is Monday and they say they can't come till Friday because that's when they get off work, I'll tell them to call back and get the code for that day, and I'll give it to them. 1, because I haven't changed the code to the new code yet, but 2, because I want to make sure that this person is going to follow up. Doing what you say you're going to do, even on these little things, is very important to me to show that you're going to do what you say you're going to do when it comes to making rent payments and taking care of the property. So once they go to see the house, and then I tell them I never give them a lockbox code by email or text message. I only give lockbox codes by phone, where I talk to them directly and I explain where the lockbox is at, how to use the lockbox if they don't know. And then I tell them to call me whether they like the property or not immediately after they've seen the property. That way I can verify that they've seen it. I can verify if they like the property. They can tell me their thoughts on the property so I can get feedback. And they can say, I didn't like this or I did like this. And it allows me, if I get a lot of people saying this, that, and the other, then I know that maybe that's something I need to address. It also helps if, let's say there was a break-in at the property and they call and say, hey, Art, I just went over to your property. The door was kicked in. And not that that's happened, but, it allows somebody else to put eyes on the property, and it gives them the time to go in without the high pressure sale of, come on, are you going to buy this place or are you going to rent this place? It allows them to go in, take their time, look at the rooms, show their kids and all that kind of stuff. I've never had, now I'm sure the question is going to come up. What about people breaking into the house after you've been there? Or what about people taking the key out of the lockbox house? I have never had that problem, and I think it's because of the way this system is set up. I actually learned this system when I was at a real estate seminar with another landlord suggested that they did the same thing, and I was completely scared out of my mind when I heard it, but it made so much sense. The reason this thing works is because, 1, they can see it at their leisure. When someone tells you they're going to meet at 5 o'clock and they don't get there till 6:30, I'm not waiting there for an hour and a half, wasting my day. They get there when they get there. They can go see the house. They can, go in and take a look at it and everything. And it's convenient for them. They can stay as long or as little as they want. If they want to go see 7 or 8 of my houses and I've got a list for them, they can go see all of them on a Saturday. I don't have to follow them around that Saturday and take them to each house. It just makes the entire process much easier. So once they've seen the house, they call me back. They say, yes, I want it, that kind of thing. Once they say they want it, and now they're kind of sold on this place, Now I tell them, okay, the next step is to do our full background check, which we use the lease defend service to verify their income and their bill payment history, and how they pay their bills, how they manage their bank account, how they manage their finances. We have them do that application through the Lease Defend website. They pay for that application directly through the Lease Defend website, so we don't have to deal with any money or anything like that. Once that comes back to us, and that's another follow through, they have to follow through with that part of the process. The other benefit, I forgot to mention, the other benefit with screening a tenant where they go see the property themselves is sometimes, and if you play it right, 2 or 3 people will go to the property around the same time. I try to schedule people so they go around the same time, because nothing creates desire like other people. Everybody wants what everybody wants. So if there are 2 or 3 people looking at the property when they get there, or a person or another family shows up while they're there, it's very strong that one of them are really going to want that house now, because now it's just not a matter of, do I like this place? It's, do I like this place enough before I lose it? And that fear of losing becomes real, and it makes them, pushes them forward to make a decision quickly. So I like to try to bunch them up. That's why you have to have a system in place that fills your funnel up with applicants, so that you can make the best decision of who to pick. Instead of just, I've got one person interested because that's the only person that showed up to the house, I can schedule 100 people to go look at the house after they've given me their application info. And then I can also, once they've seen it, then, if they're not interested, or even better, they drag their feet about making a decision, I have all of their contact information. So the next time I have a house that fits their need, I can email blast all the people that have come in my pipeline, let's say in the last 30 to 60 days, and say, hey, here's a new house we have available. If you're interested, you need to hop on it. They'll call right back in because they know the program, they know me, they remember filling out the application, and they'll say, hey, I want to take a look at that house. And I'll have a frenzy of people go to look at that new property in the first day or so. And usually my properties rent in the first week or less. So it's very effective. It's a step-by-step process, and it's made to make the tenant jump through the hoops and not you jump through the hoops. Once the background check comes back from Lease Defend, then I tell them they're approved. We set up for them to meet, sign their paperwork, pay their deposit money, and pay their first month's rent or whatever you work out. And we hand them keys, and they go from there. And I also give them a welcome package, which explains, things like garbage pickup, things about what to do if you have a problem with the property, what to do if you have problems with your payments, and things like that. So that is the process for me to screen a tenant. It's a little bit detailed, but believe me, it works extremely well. It has literally cut my evictions down to 0. By the time people go through my whole process, they seriously want the house, and they're seriously showing that they're committed to doing what it takes to get that house. So that's it for my process. I hope you all have enjoyed it. I hope you all, it makes sense to you. If you have questions or concerns, or you're thinking there's no way in hell I'm going to let somebody go into my house with a lockbox, and you have concerns or questions or things that you think I might not have considered, I'd love to get your comments in the feedback section, and I'll respond quickly, and we can discuss it further offline. But until then, I wish you the best. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. This has been Art Veal with the Lease Defend podcast, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye.